Five enter, only one returns, but even she is forever changed. This is Annihilation. Annihilation is a special film. It's about venturing into the unknown. It plays with concepts of cosmic horror, visually and thematically, and it ultimately presents one of the bleakest realities that I've ever seen put to film, even though it might not seem so after the first viewing. This is a natural continuation for my Sunshine essay, which is also a film written by Alex Garland, the writer-director of Annihilation, although this time around the elements of cosmic horror are very different. As I am very excited to dive into the subject itself, I'm going to cut this introduction short, although a few contextual notes should be mentioned here. I'm going to be focusing on the analysis of Annihilation instead of recapping, so I would recommend watching the film before this essay. Throughout this essay, I'm going to be comparing the film Annihilation to Jeff Vandermeer's novel that it was adapted from, also called Annihilation. The two narratives are, put bluntly, extremely different, but let's nail down some important terminology here. When I refer to Annihilation, I am referring to the film specifically. Conversely, when I talk about the novel, I'm just going to call it the novel or the book. In the novel, the characters don't have names apart from their assigned tasks as a part of the expedition. Therefore, whenever I refer to the biologist, you can just infer that I'm referring to the protagonist of the novel, who in turn is called Lena in the film. Similarly, the psychologist in the novel is Ventress in the film, etc., etc. The only exception to this rule is that the film's The Shimmer and the novel's Area X will be used interchangeably throughout this essay. I'll try to explain the monstrous beings and events of the novel as well as best as I can, but I also want to emphasize a focus on the film specifically, so this will only be a surface level scratch at the contents of the book. I would urge each and every one of you to go read Vandermeer's Annihilation. I know a lot of people are just going to be watching this without having read it, but I assure you it is definitely worth your time. I went into it a bit skeptical and honestly came out thinking that it was even more horrifying than the film, albeit for entirely different reasons. On that note, I will only be discussing the first book in the Southern Reach trilogy, or soon saga. There are going to be moments where I will refer to information from the first book that is expanded upon in authority and acceptance, but know that I'm working only on the basis of the first book because that's also the only part of the story that Alex Garland had access to while writing this film. Essentially, the film was written without knowledge of the book's sequels, so this essay will also confine to that knowledge base.
How the other two either play into this or don't at all. It's kind of, they don't touch it in any way.
They really don't. I mean, it's partly because Jeff was writing the trilogy. He was still actually writing it while I was writing the screenplay for the first.
This is without a doubt the most labor-intensive project that I've ever tackled on the channel, so all the support, be that in form of subscribing, liking, sharing, or commenting on the video, is greatly appreciated. With that, let's finally get to the good stuff. Annihilation embodies many of the elements of cosmic horror. We have monstrosities from the literal cosmos that have invaded Earth and begun to morph the human environment to their own benefit. It isn't, of course, that simple, but we're a bit too early to dive into the deep intricacies of the Shimmer or what it represents, so let's look at the contents of the film a bit more broadly for now. The basic concept of Annihilation is that the Shimmer acts as a prism, mutating and combining DNA of multiple different beings at a rapid pace. The film explains this 37 minutes in, with Lena noticing that there is a pathogen in the flowers and in the alligator that attacks the expedition. The alligator's several rows of concentric teeth makes it seem like a crossbreed with a shark, although as Lena notes, crossbreeding between two different species isn't possible. There's clearly something weird going on. The novel also plays with the idea of mutation, but there's an added focus on otherworldly creatures as well. For example, there's a creature in the reeds that moans at night, and the biologist never gets a clear glimpse of it, although it is implied that the monster reanimated and took hold of the former expedition's psychologist. Now, as I agreed from the beginning, this video will not spoil any of the Southern Reach books. We do learn more about this creature in the sequels, but let's stick to this point. This is how the creature's abandoned exoskeleton is described in the novel. Incredibly, a human face seemed to be rising out of the earth, but when after a moment nothing further happened, I shone my light on it again and saw a kind of tan mask made of skin, half transparent, resembling in its way the discarded shell of a horseshoe crab. A white face with a hint of pockmarks across the left cheek. The eyes were blank, sightless staring. I felt as if I should recognize these features, that it was very important, but with them disembodied in this way, I could not. When I bent at the knees and shone my flashlight ahead, I saw more detritus from a kind of molting, a long trail of skin-like debris, husks and sloughings. Clearly, I might soon meet what had shed this material, and just as clearly the moaning creature was, or had once been, human. There's also the tower, which, contrary to its name, tunnels into the ground. The expedition members, hypnotized by the psychologist, don't realize that it is a massive living organism with fleshy walls and a heartbeat that gets louder the deeper you go into it. I haven't mentioned the hypnosis, so just know that it's a major element of the novel's narrative. The psychologist controls the other expedition members with hypnotic suggestion, programmed months before they enter Area X. Finally, there's the Crawler, a creature which slowly crawls up and down the staircase of the tower, writing a cryptic message on the wall. In the traditions of the genre, it is difficult to describe as the biologist puts it. There in the depths of the tower, I could not begin to understand what I was looking at, and even now I have to work hard to pull it together from fragments. It is difficult to tell what blanks my mind might be filling in just to remove the weight of so many unknowns. The Crawler kept changing at a lightning pace, as if to mock my ability to comprehend it. As the events of the two narratives and the mutations overall don't share much crossover, we need to establish a broader way to analyze the data. As I am pedantic by nature, I of course had to create a taxonomy to describe this. There's animal-to-animal mutation, animal-to-human mutation, human-to-human mutation, human-to-flora mutation, and human-to-alien mutation, or if you'd like, alien-to-human mutation. These categorizations are quite broad, and the last one in itself could be two different categories, but I'm trying to make this as simple as possible. Tell me in the comments if you feel like there's something missing here, by the way. We've already seen the animal-to-animal mutation with the alligator, so let's jump into the second type. The human-to-animal mutation is far more apparent in the novel, in which multiple different animals give a sense of intellect to the biologist. At the middle points of the novel, there is a mention of a dolphin with a human eye, which honestly stuck out to me as one of the sadder moments in the story. Then something more wrenching occurred. As they slid by, the nearest one rolled slightly to the side, and it stared at me with an eye that did not, in that brief flash, resemble a dolphin eye to me. It was painfully human, almost familiar. And later on, in glimmers, in shreds of thoughts, in the aftermath of my reading, I wondered if he kept a journal still, or if the dolphin's eye had been familiar for a reason other than it was so human. But soon enough I banished this nonsense. Some questions will ruin you if you are denied the answer long enough. I took this to mean that the biologist's husband was the dolphin that she saw. I won't comment if that's the case. I guess you'll just have to go read the sequels. Whatever may be the case, however, this moment strikes me as particularly tragic because eyes convey so much of our internal emotions. The adage of eyes are the window of the soul becomes incredibly eerie when that window is attached to a human trapped in an animal body. To me, it is an incredibly disturbing example of the type of body horror that the novel utilizes. In the film, this kind of mutation is found in the nightmare bear. The movie doesn't imply that the bear was human at one point or another like the dolphin in the novel, but as Josie states, as it mauled Shepard, a part of her was attached to the bear. A part of her, the part that was in excruciating pain, lives on in the being that actually killed her. A horrific thought. In fact, this realization is so horrific to Josie that she succumbs to the Shimmer's prism almost immediately after realizing this.
I think as she was dying, part of her mind became part of the creature that was killing her. Imagine dying frightened and in pain and having that as the only part of you which survives. I wouldn't like that at all.
Josie represents the film's version of human to Flora mutation. She starts to grow flowers from her wounds as she comes to the realization that the prism has already affected all of them and that the expedition's fate is sealed. She walks off and turns into one of the floral figures that the expedition discovered the day before. I suppose another example of this could be one of the previous expedition's members turning into the fungus mural, for a lack of a better term, that is found in the swimming pool at the former Southern Reach base camp. The only distinction that should be noted here is that the member was already, well, presumably, dead, and only after did he become a colony for the fungus. Now, the Wikipedia article for Annihilation describes this as a lichen, but I won't pretend like I didn't sleep through this part of biology class. As a final point relating to the human to Flora mutation, in the novel, the biologist gets exposed to a kind of spore that slowly starts to grow inside her body and take over her. It is described as a brightness within her chest, which only starts to literally glow later on. The brightness gives the biologist the power to withstand the psychologist's hypnosis and later on also avoid the traps that the surveyor has laid out for her. All in all, it doesn't seem dangerous. That is, until the biologist gets trapped by the crawler, which suffocates her unconscious, only for the brightness to instantly bring her back again and again and again in a truly horrifying moment in the novel. It was the most agony I have ever been in, as if a metal rod had been repeatedly thrust into me and then the pain distributed like a second skin inside the contours of my outline. Everything became tinged with the red. I blacked out, I came to. Blacked out, came to, blacked out, still perpetually gasping for breath, knees buckling, scrabbling at the wall for support. My mouth opened so wide from the shrieking that something popped in my jaw. I think I stopped breathing for a minute, but the brightness inside experienced no such interruption. It just kept oxygenating my blood. Most of the expedition members experience milder forms of mutation that don't morph their bodies into the flora or the fauna around them. For example, Thornton notices that her fingerprints start to move around, a particularly disturbing concept considering that fingerprints are what we use to identify each other in modern society. It's a literal malforming, a perversion of one of the most common qualities that we have as humans. It's the thing that separates you from the people around you. I suspect that some people will groan at this type of observation, but I would argue that it is pretty freaking scary when you think about it. Something altering your body rapidly is an inherently horrifying idea. But if you want a bit more of a drastic example, let's go with this. Similarly, the member of the previous expedition in the pool noticed that his intestines started to move rapidly inside his body, and as Kane opened him up, it became apparent that he wasn't lying. To be honest, I always thought that this was more of an internal parasite, like a snake or something along those lines, which the film itself also brings up.
There was something alive inside that man.
No, that was a trick of the light.
What?
So, I guess it's open to multiple interpretations. Perhaps a third and most horrifying option in my opinion could be to think of the moving intestines as another form of human to animal mutation. Maybe there was something slithering nearby that the shimmer combined with the man's intestines, creating this horrific mutation. The film also makes it a point to display that the DNAs of the human expedition members start to mirror each other. The Ouroboros tattoo which Thornton has begins to form onto Lena's arm as a bruise. After Lena returns from the expedition, it has fully formed. People have also noted that the tattoo appears on the man in the pool, although I don't know how to interpret this particular aspect. Thornton definitely has the tattoo at the beginning of the film before entering Area X, so it couldn't have come from the man in the pool. Conversely, the video in which Kane cuts into the guy doesn't show him having a tattoo, but then again the video is pretty dark and it doesn't show his forearm. So it is possible that the prism took it from Thornton and formed on the man in the pool, although this would have had to happen incredibly fast as the expedition only entered the building 15 minutes or so ago. The symbolism of the Ouroboros, as in a snake eating itself in an eternal loop, in the context of Annihilation is also provocative, considering that the Shimmer is a place where beings seemingly never die, but are just reborn as something different. Whatever may be the case here, it is very interesting that this confirms that DNA isn't the only thing that the Shimmer shapes. Tattoos aren't attached to our DNA, so there has to be a more surface level of transformation to the Shimmer as well. My kids will be thankful for not getting my cool-ass arrival tattoo. The human-to-alien mutation happens through Ventress and Lena at the final moments of the film. As Lena enters the bottom of the lighthouse, it is already clear that Ventress's DNA has been combined with the aliens, as Ventress has an odd patch of, well, let's call it skin on her eyes. This transformation, however, doesn't resemble the ones that we've seen before. The nightmare bear at the end of the day was an animal with a human consciousness trapped inside it. Josie's transformation into a plant also just means that Josie is going to live in a floral form from now on. With Ventress, the transformation seemingly disappears as Lena comes into contact with her. This immediately makes the audience question the intentionality behind this transformation. It would seem like the alien can actually control the form it takes, unlike the animals or the plants. This is where things become a bit trippy. A lot has been said about the indescribable nature of eldritch beings, and that has always been a challenge for the filmmakers in this genre. How do you visualize something that is supposed to be impossible to describe? In this moment, Annihilation presents its version of a being like that. The alien is very much in line with the indescribable. I wasn't able to describe it until I read the Wikipedia page, which uses the term partial Mandelbulb for its form, so I guess we're going with that. I was honestly going to say that it looked like one of those Windows Media Player animations that I used to mess around with as a child, but that might go over the heads of some of the younger audience members. It might come as a surprise, but this being is actually an original creation for the film. The crawler in the novel, which is probably the closest approximation to the alien in the film, doesn't look like this at all. Lena stares at the alien completely transfixed. This moment reminds me a lot of the way that the crew of Icarus 2 stared at the sun, which just shows how much Garland likes to play around with the concept of staring into something that the mind cannot comprehend. And it is in that moment that a drop of Lena's blood gets sucked into the being. Cells begin to multiply just like Lena described at the beginning of the film, referring to the first being to exist on the planet. It's happening all over again through this alien.
All cells were ultimately born from one cell. A single organism, alone on planet Earth, perhaps alone in the universe. 1 became 2, 2 became 4, then 8, 16, 32. The rhythm of the dividing pair, which becomes the structure of every microbe, blade of grass, sea creature, land creature, and human. The structure of everything that lives and everything that dies.
What comes after is this humanoid being without any of the human features, colored like gasoline on hot pavement. The final confrontation with the doppelganger is a clear departure from all the other monsters encountered so far. While the alligator and the nightmare bear were clear physical threats, literally attacking the expedition members, the alien doesn't actually attack Lena directly at first. Now, I might sound like a fanboy when I say this, but this is a brilliant screenwriting decision. The being that has the most alien appearance yet isn't actually directly hostile. Paradoxically, this makes it even scarier, because for the first time in the film, Lena and the audience are met with something that isn't of this world and doesn't function on base predatory instincts. As we now know that it turned into Cain and into Ventress, we also realize that it can at least mimic human-like intelligence. What's completely missing is the being's motivations. Why create Area X or the Shimmer? Is it trying to change the environment to its own benefit, terraforming our planet? Or was this just a massive cosmic accident, the landing of the meteorite and nature doing whatever it did on the planet that it came from? Lena reflects on this reality in one of the final moments in the film.
I don't think it wanted anything.
But it attacked you.
It mirrored me. I attacked it. I'm not sure it even knew I was there.
It came here for a reason. It was mutating our environment. It was destroying everything.
It wasn't destroying. It was changing everything. It was making something new.
I can't honestly decide which of these possibilities, destroying or creating something new, would be the more horrifying option. Destruction is something that we can comprehend. It creates a simple us versus them dichotomy. We know that when push comes to shove, we can simply respond with even more violence. However, if the alien was quote-unquote only creating something new, if this is just how nature works outside our common planetary habitat, how can we ever hope to live on, knowing that there are entities out there that can alter us on a core level by just being? For all we know, creatures like the alien are only the first taste of what's to come when the boundaries of the cosmos start to encroach on our daily existence. It's a classic example of fear of the unknown. These elements of body horror in Annihilation are without a doubt creepy and what has become the most memorable aspect of the film. Whenever Annihilation is brought up, it will always lead to someone referring to the Nightmare Bear, and it isn't hard to see why. This moment is done extremely well. The design of the bear is incredibly spooky. However, that is only a singular part of what makes Annihilation such a special work in my eyes. There's so much going on under the surface here, both literally and metaphorically. Losing control of your own body is without a doubt an element of body horror, but here in the context of Annihilation, the horror isn't only due to a violation of our basic biology, but also due to knowing that there is something that can alter us just by being. Cosmic horror often gets equated with the loss of sanity, but I find the idea of losing your own body, mine still trapped inside, a much scarier notion. And this is why we need to go one level deeper. The thing that separates Annihilation from all the other sci-fi horror films that I've seen is the tangible feeling of losing oneself to something alien. Whereas films like Alien and The Thing play around with the paranoia and fear that is born from something alien taking over you or taking your form and discarding you, Annihilation presents a more subtle side to this kind of body horror. We've already explored the notion of bodily change and losing one's bodily autonomy, but Annihilation goes much deeper than that. Film Crit Hulk, who has an excellent essay on Annihilation, linked in the description by the way, made this point. It is easy to view the word annihilation through the classic definition of complete destruction or obliteration, but there's actually a more pointed definition in physics, which is the conversion of matter into energy, especially the mutual conversion of a particle and an antiparticle into electromagnetic radiation. Big props to Film Crit Hulk for noticing this. I would have never stumbled onto this. Thus, by this observation, the annihilation that the members of the 12th expedition face isn't only death, it's change. It's not just about body horror like losing a limb or an alien using you as a means of reproduction, it's about changing profoundly, psychologically and on a core level. The shell remains the same, but the being inside doesn't match what once was. The film finds a very interesting way to lean on this side specifically by fleshing out the background of each expedition member. The members of the 12th expedition aren't only connected due to their biological sex, but also due to their individual backgrounds outside Area X. Lena has cheated on her husband, Ventress has cancer, Josie self-harms, Shepard has lost a child, and Thornton is a former addict. On a storytelling basis, it's a great way of explaining why one might even join an expedition like this. Up until Kane's reappearance, no one has ever returned from the Shimmer. Therefore, anyone who would be willing to enter clearly doesn't have much to lose. Anyone who joins the expedition is expecting to disappear or die on the trek into the unknown. Thematically, however, it gets even better. Lena asks Ventress about her husband and why he might join the expedition in the first place. This leads into one of the most important scenes in the film.
Why did my husband volunteer for a suicide mission?
Is that what you think we're doing? Committing suicide?
You must have profiled him, you must have assessed him. He must have said something.
So you're asking me as a psychologist?
Yeah.
Then as a psychologist, I'd say you're confusing suicide with self-destruction. Almost none of us commit suicide, and almost all of us self-destruct in some way, in some part of our lives. We drink, or we smoke, we destabilize the good job, the happy marriage. But these aren't decisions, they're impulses. Isn't self-destruction coded into us? Programmed into each cell?
This speech insinuates that humans, just like other animals, work on base impulses. It insinuates that we aren't in control of our own biology. This fact is reflected in each expedition member's background, be that in the form of mental illness, addiction, or disease. Ventress's speech implies that even Lena, who is healthy both physically and mentally, cheated on Kane due to a biological imperative to do so. Not because of some evolutionary instinct to reproduce, mind you, but because it is in our biology to self-destruct in one way or another. By Ventress's own logic, it isn't that different from disease or mental illness. The only one that doesn't fit into this reading cleanly is Shepard, who is on the expedition because her daughter passed away, thus she is one step removed from the biological loss of control. It is a highly cynical view, of course, and I would like to note that I don't personally subscribe to the way that Ventress sees this side of life, but it is a philosophy that is ingrained into Annihilation's core theme. Nature isn't fair and it has never been. The Shimmer is this philosophy materialized, and on steroids. This is the quote-unquote cancer angle of the film, and it is made apparent from the very first scene, in which Lena teaches a lecture about a patient with cervical cancer. Later on, it is reinforced with Lena reading The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, which is a non-fiction book about a woman with cervical cancer whose cells were harvested without informed consent into an immortalized cell line. It is, without a doubt, a very provocative prop to have in the film. What happened to Henrietta Lacks is kinda like what happens to Lena by the end of the film. The alien takes cells and forms them into something else entirely. Not only are we not in control of our own biology, but here is a being that can change its own biology and ours as well, and do so very easily. As is displayed in the final scene of the film, although Lena has made it out of the Shimmer seemingly unchanged, even she doesn't know who she is anymore. She did what everyone else couldn't, Kane included, and still she is deeply affected by her time in the Shimmer. Simply put, Lena isn't Lena anymore. The outside remains the same, apart from the tattoo, I guess, but the inside doesn't match what it once was. Even though numerous people have suggested that this is not Lena but the doppelganger, I choose to believe my reading that this is in fact Lena, as I personally just find that the more interesting conclusion for the story. Just like with almost every other character that has fallen to the Shimmer throughout the film, Lena now too has a part of Area X in her, albeit this time it is the origin of the Shimmer. This would imply, in my opinion, that it will all happen again. Ultimately, the fate of the 12th expedition and those before fall under the massive weight of cosmic indifference. The Shimmer and the alien that causes it is beyond comprehension, both in its form and its motivations. The expeditions don't make it out because they are met with something that is beyond them in every conceivable way. There is no cause and effect to be found here, only the being and the knowledge that we weren't meant to come into contact with something like it. Thanks for watching. Consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed this video. Check out my socials on the screen and get more updates and memes from me, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.